Hello, welcome to the X Point YouTube channel. Today we have a top 8 match from the X Point 17 tournament, which ran from June 15th to July 15th, 2022. As always, if you want to skip the introductions and the deck text, you can jump straight to the games using the timestamps below. As a refresher, X Points is an old school Magic variant that uses the Atlantic rule set as well as a point system, and players can spend up to 10 points of the cards you see on the screen. Today's match is between myself on a blue-red Atog deck and Rob, who's playing a black-green Ponza deck of his own creation. Today's match not only is a good match and a top 8 match, so is important for the tournament, but it's also the first time I am casting one of my own games, so I'm open to hearing suggestions on how I could have played more optimally. Leave them in the comments below, but as always, please be nice. All right, first let's take a look at my deck. It is a fairly standard blue-red Atog deck. It's got Atogs, Dibs, Vices, Onks, and the 12-bolt package. The only mildly interesting things are 2 copper tablets for a little extra burn. That's also an artifact, as well as 2 Goblins of the Flarg, which are acceptable as a 1-drop. You'll also note there are no volcanic islands because I sold them all 20 years ago and then again 10 years ago. So still working on that. I've spent my points on Soul Ring, Wheel of Fortune, and 4 factories. Most of those will get sacked to an Atog at some point. And then 1 point on a maze in the sideboard. Speaking of the sideboard, it is mostly tuned against other blue-red decks and Shops decks. So I don't have that much for Rob's black-green deck. The Psychic Purge can come in to battle his discard spells, and maybe the Control Magics for his Urnums and Sengers, but maybe not because there's not a whole lot to take out. So we'll see what I end up doing. Let's take a look at Rob's deck. He's playing a black-green Ponza deck that he's been working on for a couple months. He has 8 land destruction spells in Ice Storm and Sinkhole, as well as 8 discard spells in Hymn to Turak and Hypnotic Spectre. He's hoping to close the game out with Urnum Djinn or Senger Vampire. For removal, he's running 4 Paralyze, and that's actually excellent with his land destruction package. Paralyze says you have to pay 4 mana each turn to untap a creature, and very often his opponents will just not have 4 lands in play, so each creature becomes kind of a one-shot deal. He's also running 3 main deck Crumbles, which will be excellent against my low casting cost artifacts. For points, he has played Mox Jet for a turn 1 Sinkhole or a turn 1 Hymn, Regrowth, 3 Mizra's Factories, and 4 Hymn to Turax. In the picture, there is a card above the 3 factories that could be a 4th factory, but I think is a black bordered Bayou. If it is a 4th factory, then Rob has snuck in 11 points, and I would like my money back, please. In his sideboard, Rob has some cards, though, quite good against me. He has 2 Terrors, which will take out an Atog, and unlike Paralyze, Terror is an instant, so he can kill my Atog after I've sacked all the artifacts. He also has a 4th Crumble and 2 Dark Heart of the Woods, which will allow him to sack Forest to gain 3 life. Usually we see this in a land tax get-in deck, but in this case, he's just running it for pure life gain. And that could very easily put him out of my burn range. Like me, there's not a whole lot he wants to take out, or there's not a whole lot I can think of to take out, so it could be tight, but we'll see what he does. So let's get to the match. Okay, welcome to Game 1 of this top 8 match. I'm on the left with the Atog deck. Rob's on the right, playing black-green Ponza. Rob gets to go first, as he was the higher-seeded player coming into the playoffs. Immediately mulligans to 6. Thinking about my hand. And looks like I'm going to stay on 7. So Rob will shuffle here. And try for 6 cards. See if that is any better. No, he's going to 5. So, mulliganing down to 5, you hate to see it, even in this rather competitive top 8. Both players trying to win, both players trying to get league points. It's oftentimes when one player mulligans to 5, especially in X points without all the ancestrals and things like that, it just becomes a non-game. So hopefully that's not the case here. You still want to have a good game of Magic, but that's how it works sometimes. Rob's going to keep his 5, puts 2 on the bottom. Starts off with the Bayou and passes. Play a Mountain into a Black Vise, which does literally nothing. Rob's double mulligan has undone it. Yeah, we're commenting about that. Very unfortunate, but you keep a Vice hand every time. Take 1 from my own City of Brass to play an Ankh of Mishra. Rob's immediately going to play a land, taking 2 for a Hypnotic Spectre. So he's not so worried. This is the whole point of my deck, by the way, and all the Atog decks. If you play out your lands, you take Ankh damage, and if you hold them in your hands, you take Vice damage. It looks like I do not have a 3rd land here, and pass the turn back to Rob, who Ice Storms my Mountain. So that's a really good play against a person who does not have a 3rd land. And I have to draw and send it back. Rob draws for his turn, and hymns 2 cards out of my hand. Looks like I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So grabs a Hercule's Recall and an Ankh of Mishra. Recall's unlikely to be good against his deck, but on 1 land I have to draw and pass again. Rob takes 2 to play a Bayou. I guess he'd rather take 2 once than potentially take Black Vise damage forever. I spent a turn drawing and passing, and then played a Mountain and an Atog, which Rob immediately paralyzes. So it's going to be a while before I can untap that Atog, and I'll have to deal at least 4 points of damage to myself to do so. And still haven't found a 3rd land, so what seemed like a non-game on Rob's end is quickly turning into a non-game on my end. Magic is a cruel mistress. And Rob has yet another Ice Storm. Things are not looking good for me. I'll take another 2 to play a Factory. And let's see. Nope, pass it back. Rob continues to play out his lands. He is not scared of the Black Vise against a 12-bolt deck, which he must assume I am by now. So, bold move from him, but he seems like he's in a commanding position, especially after he crumbles my Factory. We know he has main deck crumbles from the deck tech, but I did not know it at the time. There is a Chaos Orb. Let's see if he'll flip on my island to keep me off lands even longer. The only good part for me is that Rob is not pressuring me. He has destroyed most of my lands, but all of the damage I have done to myself. So, oh, and he is flipping on my island, and we weren't playing Gentleman's Rules. I know that Rob put his Chaos Orb in the graveyard right away, but he flips a proxy to preserve the integrity of his Chaos Orb. Playing out my 6th land for the game, but still only have 2 in play somehow. And Rob's Sylvan Library. I wonder if he'll be as cavalier with the Sylvan as he was with as he's being with the Ankh. I'm hoping, as I Chain Lightning him. And there's an Urnum Jinn, so there's the clock that Rob needed. If I can't answer that, I'm on 10. I'll be dead in 3 turns and wouldn't be able to play another land. So I think my only out is double bolt. And I have to decide whether I want to double bolt him. And if I had 4 bolts in hand, you could make a case for that, but it looks like I don't, because I double bolt the Urnum. It's painful on a number of levels. More painful to watch back. Rob's thinking. I think he's actually contemplating taking an extra card here. But I do have 6 cards in hand, I think, 5 or 6, so, 3 of them could be bolts. He's got an Elves of Deep Shadow, which is actually a 5-turn clock with his Pendlehaven. and that's assuming I don't play another land or tap my City of Brass, so that might be good enough for a threat. Sack my Ankh to the Atog, play another land, and play a Serendib. So with Rob on 11, he's on a 4-turn clock. I'm on 8, facing down Elves of Deep Shadow. So Rob is winning this race as it stands right now. Obviously, I could have more burn spells in my hand that would tilt it towards me, but we'll see. Hymn to Turax. Rob's hoping we'll take some of those burn spells. He gets an Ankh and a Psionic Blast, so I don't know if the Blast would really help me, since I would have to tap my city and then take 2, so I play my 3rd Black Vice, and Rob, still with 2 cards in his hand, has taken 0 Black Vice damage from 3 Vices this game. Swinging with the Serendib. I know I lose this race, but I have a lot of outs. Rob attacks with the Elves and then plays a very important flying blocker with the Hypnotic Spectre. And I take another damage to untap my Atog. Rob's only on 8, so the Atog, while not lethal by itself, is very close to it if I sack all 3 Vices. So he smartly blocks the Atog with his Hippie, and I sack a Vice so that it lives. I have a Factory. It would be really great if I could activate the Factory and block his Elf this turn, but I do not have any more open mana, so I'm going to take at least 2 more from the Elf and then 1 from my Serendib, so I am effectively at 1 life. We'll see if Rob can find anything to do the last point of damage this turn. I'm not sure what that would be in his deck. So I'm probably safe, but still in a bad situation. I think what Rob really needs right here is a blocker for the Atog or the Serendib. And then he could swing freely with the Elf, and he also has to consider what that last card in my hand is, and is it a Lightning Bolt? Well, it appears he has found a blocker since he swings with the Elves, and yes, there is a second Elves of Deep Shadow. So now I have to decide, as I fall to 1 from the Serendib, do I want to untap the Atog, which will clearly just be blocked by the Elves of Deep Shadow, or do I want to hope to top deck a Bolt? Draw for the turn. And so I have to kill Rob this turn, or my Serendib kills me next turn. So swing in, he goes to 2. Bolt wins it, but a Psionic Blast ties it, and game number 1 ends a draw. I'm at -1. Rob's at -2, but as far as Richard Garfield's concerned, those 2 numbers are identical in this case, so we'll move on to game number 2. Okay, game number 2, and we were a little unsure what happens at the beginning of this game, since game 1 was a draw. We assumed Rob was on the play again, but we didn't know if you got to sideboard. Ultimately, we decided you could. Rob found a ruling online that suggested that. If you know the exact answer, leave it down in the comments below so we can all learn together. So this will be a sideboarded game, even though the score is 0-0. Rob's thinking about whether to keep his 7-card hand. He might be a little mulligan shy after the last game, but it didn't turn out so bad for him, so. And he knows I have Black Vice, so mulliganing is not the worst. He keeps a 7, plays just a Bayou, and I have a Mountain into Black Vice, so Rob's going to take 2. 4th Vice of the match, but the first Vice damage. Rob just plays a land and passes, which is good news for me with my Vice. And I have the Ankh, same start as last game, but this time Rob has cards in his hand, and he just has to pass the turn on 2 lands, so this is exactly the position I want to be in. playing out a copper tablet. So my entire artifact engine is online. Takes 3 from the Vice, 1 from the tablet. Plays a land, takes 2 from the Ankh. He's down to 10. And I am happy that he is only ice storming a mountain. I don't really need any more lands at this point. The Ankh, the Vice, and the tablet should do him in for me. Take 2 to play a city, double Chain Lightning, and that's enough to move us on to game number 3. All right, Rob will start for game number 3. He gets the chance to start 3 games in a row, which is not something that happens a lot in Magic. He starts with an elf. I play out a factory, and looks like Rob has a second elf, yeah. And then casts a Hymn to Turak, so he's going to take 2 of my 7 cards. 2 lands, so I really hope that I have at least 1 more land in my hand, and I do, but it's not one that's helpful right now. The Maze of Ith. Here comes Rob swinging in with his elves. I can untap 1 with the Maze, and then he plays out Hypnotic Spectre. So actually did him a little bit of a favor. He wouldn't have been able to play that hippie if I hadn't untapped 1 of his creatures. But at least the Maze can keep the hippie at bay. Rob is going full steam ahead. I have another ineffective Black Vise now that Rob is down to 1 card. And he Ice Storms my Maze. So as rough as the last game was for Rob, this game is looking also rough for me, and our connection's also looking rough, so nothing is really going my way in this game. Oh, and we... okay. I guess I could edit those out. We'll leave it in so you can get the full whereby experience. And here I'm about to discard a card, and it's a Psychic Purge, so 1 of my sideboard cards, and Rob takes 5, so that's really the best scenario right there for me. Especially since I couldn't actually cast the Psychic Purge at the time. I'll play an Atog. Curious if that gets in for any damage or not. Rob's looking at cards and still just keeps 1. He's not bold enough to take any cards with Sylvan Library yet to pay any life. By now he's figured out I'm playing a Suite of Burn. So his life total needs to be a little precious, except for right now, when he has Dark Heart of the Woods. So Rob has effectively gained 9 life with his 3 forests in play. He was at 13 and now he's at 21, I guess. So I don't think he'll worry about taking a hit from the Atog. Drops to 12. And I'm still on 2 lands again, so we'll see if I can make a miraculous comeback like I did in the first game. But now that Rob has the Dark Heart, he's actually considering taking extra cards with the Sylvan Library. If he takes a forest, he can effectively remove it from the top of his deck for just 1 life, because he could sacrifice it for 3 more. Still decides just to take 1, swing in with the hippie, and spent with the bolt. Take 1 from my own city, though. I guess it's better than discarding. And speaking of discarding, there's a Hymn to Turak, so I'm going to be left with 1 card in my hand. He gets double Psionic Blast, so my outs are closing fast. His discard, his land destruction has all been very good this game. And luckily, yet again, he doesn't have that much pressure with just 2 Elves of Deep Shadow. And I make the risky move of playing Serendib Efreet off of the City of Brass. So I'm on an 8-turn clock, and that's solely my own fault. On the other hand, Rob is at 11 with 3 forests, functionally 20. So my clock is faster. He's on a 7-turn clock. I'm on an 8-turn clock. Assuming I can keep the elves at bay and don't have to tap my City of Brass anymore. Rob taps his own city and plays a Hypnotic Spectre. So he's gained himself yet another turn. Whenever you have Serendib on the battlefield, you're counting down in turns. You can see I'm wringing my hands a little bit. Clearly, I didn't draw what I needed, which probably was a bolt to get rid of the hippie. So swing in with the Serendib and the Atog. And I'm at 7, so Rob could just take the damage and swing back. He has enough force that even if I have a lightning bolt or a sonic blast, he's not technically dead. He's at effectively at 15, and I'm swinging in for 4 with maximum of 3 artifacts, so 10. So even if it was a sonic blast, he would still be alive. I mean, he might have to sack all of his lands, but I'm at 7, so Rob takes a long time to think about whether to block. And he's just gonna chump the Atog with an elf, ultimately, and then take 3 from the dib. Puts him at 3. If I bolt, he can sack a forest in response to the bolt to gain 3 life, and I doubt he would sack all 3 at the same time. And I play a second Serendib there. So I speed up my own clock. I am now on a 3-turn clock myself. I am hoping that each Serendib makes me have to draw 1 more forest. Oh, but Rob regrowths a Hypnotic Spectre, playing it. Drop into 2, which is about the same as 3. He does sack a forest preemptively to go back up to 6. I must have had one of those life totals wrong. So I draw, and here's the big decision. Do I swing in? If I swing in and he blocks, he can double block 1 and drop down to 1. Or drop down to 3. Sorry, I'm getting the life totals all mixed up. But this is the big play. If I swing in with both Serendibs, I'm hoping that he chumps and is afraid of a lightning bolt. He could just not block at all. If I don't swing, he can just sit there for 2 more turns and do nothing. So the pressure is really on me to make something happen. And so I have to attack. I almost have to bluff a lightning bolt even if I don't have it. But if I can't kill him, he can just swing back for the win. So swing with all 4 of the dudes and put the pressure on Rob now to make a decision. Does he think my last card is a lightning bolt? He's effectively at 10. But I'm swinging in for potentially 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, plus 4, so 13. So he has to block somebody. And he's got to decide, does he want to double block 1 dib? Does he want to chump block them both? Does he want to block nobody? Just block the Atog with the elf? Really depends what he thinks my last card is. And he doesn't know. His main concern is it a lightning bolt? And then, of course, he has to do all the combat math for his swing back. How many creatures can he afford to lose and still make sure that I die to my own dibs the following turn? So it's a lot of math involved. I also didn't attack right away. So he's not sure that I'm not bluffing. I'm not sure that I'm not bluffing. So ultimately, he puts the elf in front of the Atog, he puts 1 hippie in front of a dib, and he's going to, I guess, take 5? Which looks like it would put him at 1 or possibly 0, but he could just obviously sack a forest. So he is going to sack a forest. Goes up to 8, so he was at 5. Jumps with the hippie. Jumps with the elf. Goes to 3. A functional 6 with the Bayou. Swings with the hippie. I got a 2. Discard control magic, which I could not cast. Oh. And I'm going to die to my own dibs on my upkeep. So game 3 goes to Rob, and he ties the series. We're going to take it to game 4 and figure out who moves on to the top 4. All right, here we are for game number 4. The hopefully final game in this series. Both of us get off to relatively slow starts. I have a turn 2 copper tablet, so That draws first blood as Rob falls to 19. He's met with Sinkhole, which we haven't seen too many of in this match. Sinkhole's one of my mountains, and I use my other mountain while I still have it to chain lightning Rob's face. Dropping him to 15. Chain lightning the hippie to protect the rest of my hand, and both of us are slowly ticking down from that copper tablet. That's why it's in here. Rob Sinkhole's my other mountain, so my chances of burning him out have just fallen quite a bit. But we still got the copper tablet ticking away. He falls to 13, and I'm still at 17. He's thinking Sinkhole, the third Sinkhole of the match, so that might be the third Sinkhole of this round. I have no lands. It's exactly what Rob wants to do, and he plays Send Vampire. I am going to have to work hard to beat that kind of clock. Rob is at 8, so a couple of bolts might do it. And Rob activates his Chaos Orb, and then I bolt him in response. And here I ask him, what is he flipping on? And I don't know what he intended at the beginning, but he stopped to think about it and decide whether he was going to flip on the tablet or the mountain. He's doing some math, some copper tablet math, to decide, does he want to flip on my mountain to protect from a bolt, or does he want to flip on the tablet to protect his life total? And it's an interesting decision, right? If I have a handful of blue cards, or anything that costs more than 1, if I don't have a handful of bolts, it might be better for him to flip on the tablet. He does flip on the mountain. Successfully hits it, and I have to pass back. So Send Vampire's coming in. Rob is at 4, so a bolt wins it. And it looks like it was not a bolt, though I did have 3 more bolts in hand, so it was possible. A mountain off the top there would have won it for me if I had bolted earlier. I'm not sure if I had all those bolts on turn 1. And mountain on the top. Oh, that's why you never look. So congratulations to Rob on a well-fought match. He will move on to the top 4, where he will face off against Yorgo, who we saw in last week's video. It'll be Rob's Black-Green Ponza against Yorgo's Blue-White Control deck to see who moves on to the finals. If you are interested in playing in these tournaments, or even playing X-Point Old School casually, head over to xpointoldschool.com, where you can find information about the format, as well as this monthly tournament series that's held on Talaria. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content just like this, and as always, thanks for watching.